We begin with a discussion on an issue making headlines. As the COVID-19 pandemic continues to paralyze economies and cause millions of job losses around the world, more and more governments are preparing income support for their citizens. But this has given momentum to the debate over having a universal basic income to guarantee citizens a minimal level of income support in the era of automation and artificial intelligence. And to delve into this issue further, we have joining us today Dr. Kaushik Basu, a professor of economics at Cornell University and former chief economist at the World Bank. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Soo-young. It's my pleasure joining you all.
Thank you. Well, first of all, a growing number of countries are moving to make emergency one-off payments for their citizens, whether it's universal or targeted to a certain level of income. And of course, some say there's no such thing as a free lunch, and that other measures such as unemployment benefits, food stamps or mandated sick leave would work just as well. I want to know what your view is on this issue.
Yeah. This won't be a free lunch giving out direct benefit, but I'll come back to the cost of it later, the fiscal cost and other matters. At this point of time, a certain amount of direct payment, whether it be like a universal basic income, negative income tax, money being handed over is essential. And we are seeing this virtually around the world, that people are going for different measures of this. Having said that, let me right away add that especially for developing countries, emerging economies, which is more than half the world, just a direct payment is not going to be good enough, just making cash available for several different reasons. And let me just explain this. This is very important. We will have to have a certain amount of direct food support or direct health benefit support. Free health benefits, free food, you have to make it available to a large mass of the population, and for the following reason, that as the pandemic continues, and we don't know how long it'll continue, it's going from one country, coming back again, so this is going to be with us for a while. We are understanding that these lockdowns and the quarantines have to be in relatively small areas. You can't have a whole area quarantined, you have to have small areas. When you do that, to those areas, like in a slum, let us say in India or in somewhere in Africa, Latin America, there is a slum and you want to quarantine the slum, lockdown. You have to get food and medicines arriving to the doorstep of the slum. So you will have to have direct support there. Another reason is very important. For a whole host of emerging economies, developing economies, first of all, you will not be able to reach cash to everyone. Everyone does not have a bank account. Lots of people have bank accounts which are dormant accounts. They've opened it, they don't even know how to use it. So you will have to have direct food support, direct health support. That is something that has to be kept in mind. Also, and this you've seen in Korea in the 1940s and 50s, I mean, it's become a much better off country now. When there is a shortage, prices begin to rise. Even if you give the poor money, the rich will compete you, and the prices will rise to the point where the poor don't get. So yes, you do need direct cash support, UBI and things like that. But at this point of time, during a pandemic, you also need direct food and health support to the people.
Governments that are rolling out income support, though, it really differs the eligibility and the size of payments depending on the country. But they do seem to be mostly one-time payments. Do you think a one-time relief would be enough? And how do you think that the direct payments should actually be designed and distributed?
Yeah. The one-time payment, first of all, what will happen is there'll be another time and another time if the pandemic continues. So I don't worry too much when a government says I'm making a one-time payment, because my feeling is if the pandemic continues, after a month, they'll say another time payment. That's fine. I don't think we should immediately think of something permanent. I'm much more in favor of, and this is a longer run thing, and there are philosophers and economists who have been writing about this for quite some time, some amount of profit sharing. That should be universal so that workers get some salaries and wages, but they also get a share of the profit. And this should be economy-wide. This has been written about, American economists Marty Weitzman, Richard Freeman, philosophers like Hillel Steiner have been writing about this. And I think we are reaching a time when we need something like that.
So time is right for a discussion for not really just corona-related measures, but more long-term sharing of dividends or profit among workers. Well, right now, governments, they are looking at more one-time measures, though, direct payments for the average citizen. But of course, they are very big projects. They are very large in terms of financing. Do you think that this will leave us with a huge fiscal deficit?
This will leave us. We can't run away from the fact that this will cause fiscal deficits to increase. There are countries like yours, South Korea, where I know last year the fiscal deficit was rising a little, but still, on the whole, it is well managed. There are countries where the fiscal deficit is high, but wherever you are, the deficit is going to grow. The way we will have to handle this, take a country like India. India has a very sophisticated law called the FRBM Act 2003, which places restrictions on how much deficit you can create. But the law is very sophisticated. There are provisions there that if there is a natural calamity or a national disaster, the government can invoke that and allow the deficit to go larger. So my view is, right now, we cannot be fussy about the deficit for about 6 months. If the deficit grows 9 months, let it grow. After that, you begin to roll in, because right now the immediate problem is absolutely critical all over the world, and especially in the emerging economies and developing countries.
I see. So right now it's not, it's wiser to throw the life jacket right now to save all these livelihoods and just be able to cushion the impact that it's having on everyday workers and just millions and millions of households. Well,
that's right.
Millions.
Yeah. It is a joint effort of the central banks and the treasuries in countries. But right now we have to be relaxed and allow for a bigger range of liquidity infusion into the system.
And you mentioned that you feel that more long-term measures are very important in terms of stabilizing people's income, profit sharing. You said, well, after this pandemic, millions, if not tens of millions of people around the world, they're going to lose their jobs throughout this pandemic. And in recent years, concerns over automation, they have led to a wider public debate over universal basic income. And how do you think that we should approach this? What measures do you think need to be done?
Suyong, there are two things over here to keep in mind, that people who have lost their jobs, in fact, my fear is not everyone will get it back even after the pandemic is gone. Because underlying the pandemic, and from much before that, there is the trend of machines and long-distance linkages taking away jobs. So I don't think we will get a full job recovery anymore after this, which means we have to think of other measures. And profit sharing, which I just briefly mentioned, in a country to say that a certain percentage, say 25% of dividends, is kept for people in general. This is not a shockingly radical policy. It sounds very radical right now, but it is not a shockingly radical policy. And people have been writing about this for the last 40 years. But it is during a crisis that you begin to look seriously at plans and policies which look radical. This happened during the Industrial Revolution. Income tax was brought in 1842. It was a shockingly radical move at that time. Now we think of this as common. Therefore, we have to take similar kinds of moves now, we will get used to it, and the world will run fine with these measures.
So really, it does sound radical, but it does seem like a move that we really need to look into making. And well, the typical arguments against UBI, they tend to be that it's very costly and it also reduces people's incentive to work. Well, meanwhile, some people, others, they say that guaranteed income could actually lead to greater economic and societal benefits beyond reducing poverty. So I'd like to know your view on this.
Yeah. The guaranteed income that you're giving is not large enough for people to say that I sit back and I don't do work. This is meant to be topping up your other income. And even if 1% of the population says that that's enough, I will not work, that is a cost we have to take. For that reason, we cannot penalize the rest of the population and say there are a few people who will drop out. And frankly, the way the space of work is going, and over the last 40 years it's shrinking, if some people drop out of the labor force and live like that, unfortunate. but we will have to live with it. So my feeling is either a universal basic income or a share which gives people an assured income is the way that the world will have to move. We will have to get down to it. It is unfortunate that it is a crisis that is forcing us to think about it. We should have been thinking about this for a long time, but let's make use of this crisis in one useful way so that the world comes out a better place when this is over.
So whether it's profit sharing or universal basic income, how should these programs be funded, especially for developing economies?
Part of the funding can be done within each country because something like profit sharing is not a strain on the fiscal system of the country. It's just demarcating a part of the profit in the country as something which goes not as dividends to the well-off and the owners, but straight to the workers and ordinary people. So there is no fiscal strain on that. But beyond that, universal basic income, infusion of food and health especially now is going to be very expensive. There, I like to hope that the world will come together and work together to transfer some money from rich countries to poor countries. We have just appealed to the leaders of G20, a whole bunch of economists and medical professionals, saying that the world has to come together, put together funds which can be used by developing countries and emerging economies. We live on a small planet and we have to learn to share our ideas, share our resources better. Not totally, we need incentives, we need lots of those things, but we need to share better. And let us hope that we can turn this pandemic into a signal of future cooperation and hope for the world.
So it's not just a matter of protecting livelihoods and income within countries, but also coordinating global action. And as much as advanced nations have benefited from globalization, they do need to share their resources as well. Wow.
Absolutely. And as I pointed out, that if we don't solve the pandemic problem worldwide, it will keep coming back from other countries. So it's not a problem which is unique to your country. You will have to solve it at a global level.
I see. Well, I'm afraid that's all we have time for today, but thank you so much for making time for us today, Dr. Basu.
Thank you very much. It was my pleasure talking.